Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The night air was warm against my skin as we stepped out of the restaurant, laughter still lingering between us. The streets were quiet, bathed in the soft glow of street lamps, and the world felt strangely smaller, just me and him in our own little bubble. My stepdad glanced at me with that easy, knowing smile, the kind that made you wonder if he was keeping a secret. I wasn't sure where we were going next, but I could tell he wasn't ready to take me home yet. And honestly, neither was I. It had started as a simple dinner. Just the two of us, since my mom had decided to stay in. I thought it would be quick, a polite meal, some small talk, and back home before midnight. But the hours stretched without either of us noticing, each conversation pulling us further into a rhythm I hadn't expected. We drove from one spot to another, coffee by the pier, a walk through the nearly empty boardwalk, then a detour into a late-night music lounge where the dim lights and soft jazz made everything feel different. There was something unspoken in the air. Not wrong, but not something I could put into words either. He told stories from years before I knew him, painting pictures of his travels, his mistakes, his dreams. And I listened, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Somewhere between his laughter and his thoughtful silences, I realized the night wasn't about where we were, it was about not wanting it to end. By the time we were sitting in his car, the clock on the dashboard was edging toward morning. The streets were completely still now, and the faint blush of dawn was just beginning to creep across the horizon. He looked at me for a moment, like he was about to say something that would change everything. My heart was pounding, waiting for whatever was coming next. But instead, he started the engine, and without telling me where we were headed, we drove off into the quiet morning. And that's when I realized, we weren't going home just yet. The hum of the engine was the only sound between us as the city faded in the rearview mirror. I watched the lights grow smaller, wondering why we were driving farther away instead of turning toward home. My stepdad's hands rested loosely on the steering wheel, but there was a focus in his eyes that made me curious, and a little uneasy. I thought about asking where we were going, but something about the quiet made me hold my tongue. It felt like if I spoke too soon, I might break whatever invisible thread was pulling us forward. We passed a sign for the old coastal road, the one that led to the cliffs. I'd only been there once before, during the day, and even then it felt like the kind of place where the world paused. Now, in the middle of the night, with the sky stretching wide and dark above us, it felt different, more alive, more unpredictable. I wondered if he brought me here on purpose or if this was just where we ended up. Along the way, his phone buzzed a few times. He glanced at it, but never picked it up. I couldn't see the name, only the faint light reflecting on his face before he set it back down. That small act made my mind race. Was it my mom? A friend? Someone else? And why wasn't he answering? We stopped at a lookout point, the kind where the ocean seemed to blend into the sky. The wind was cooler here, carrying the sharp scent of saltwater. He leaned against the hood of the car, staring out at the waves like they held answers. I stood beside him, close enough to feel the shift in his breathing. For a moment, it was peaceful, but underneath, I could sense something brewing. He started talking again, but now his voice was lower, slower. He spoke about choices, about how sometimes life takes you places you didn't expect. It wasn't a conversation about directions on a map, it felt like something deeper, like he was working up to a truth he wasn't ready to share. I could feel the questions piling up inside me, but I knew I wouldn't get all the answers tonight. Maybe not ever. When we got back into the car, he glanced at me briefly before turning the key. That look said more than words could. And as we pulled back onto the road, I realized the night was far from over. The road twisted along the coastline, the headlights cutting through the darkness in sharp beams. I could hear the ocean crashing below us, each wave louder than the last, as if the night itself was urging something to happen. My stepdad kept his eyes fixed ahead, his jaw tight, like he was holding on to thoughts he didn't want to say out loud. Every so often, his fingers tapped the steering wheel in a slow, deliberate rhythm that only made me more aware of the tension building between us. We reached another quiet stretch of road, no other cars in sight. The only light came from the moon, silver and cold, spilling across the dashboard. I noticed his phone buzzing again, and this time I saw my mom's name flash briefly before he let it go dark. My chest tightened. Why wasn't he answering? I wanted to ask, but my voice felt stuck. It was as though the silence was its own kind of conversation, one I wasn't ready to break. He suddenly slowed the car and pulled onto a narrow dirt path I didn't even know existed. Trees arched over us, their branches weaving together like they were trying to hide whatever was at the end of the road. The air grew cooler, and I felt my pulse quicken. I wasn't scared exactly, but I could feel that we were heading towards something that mattered, something neither of us could walk away from once we reached it. When we finally stopped, the view opened into a hidden cove, the moonlight spilling over the sand in pale streaks. He stepped out first, breathing deeply, like this was a place he'd been keeping in his back pocket for the right moment. I followed, the sound of my footsteps crunching against the gravel louder than the waves for a moment. He looked at me then, not casually, not in passing, but with an intensity that made me feel like the rest of the world had disappeared. His voice was quiet when he spoke, almost lost under the sound of the surf, but every word carried weight. "Before we go back," he said, "there's something you need to know." My heart was pounding now, the night pressing in on all sides. I didn't know if I wanted to hear what came next, but I knew I wouldn't forget it. The sound of the waves filled the silence between us as he stood there, his eyes locked on mine. I could see he was searching for the right words, the kind that might change the shape of the night entirely. But before he could speak, the faint crunch of footsteps echoed from the other side of the cove. At first, I thought it was just the ocean playing tricks on my ears, but then I saw a shadow moving along the rocks. My stepdad's head snapped toward the sound. His posture shifted, more alert now, as if he'd been expecting this or dreading it. He didn't say anything right away, but the look on his face made my stomach knot. Whoever it was, they weren't supposed to be here. The shadow came closer, and the figure stepped into the moonlight. It was a man I'd never seen before, tall, weathered, with the kind of expression that made you instantly feel like you'd interrupted something important. He glanced at me briefly, then fixed his gaze on my stepdad. "You didn't answer my calls," he said, his voice low but sharp. I felt my pulse quicken. Calls? This wasn't about my mom's messages anymore, this was something else entirely. My stepdad moved slightly, just enough to put himself between me and the stranger. "This isn't the place," he said firmly. The man ignored him and stepped closer, his boots crunching on the sand. "She has a right to know," he said, jerking his head toward me. My breath caught in my throat. "Know what?" I glanced at my stepdad, but he kept his eyes locked on the other man, as if answering me wasn't an option yet. The air seemed to thicken around us. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, louder than the waves now. The stranger's words made me realize that whatever my stepdad had been about to tell me wasn't just personal, it was bigger, maybe even dangerous. Then, without warning, my stepdad stepped forward. "You need to leave," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The stranger didn't flinch, but after a tense pause, he gave a short nod and backed away toward the shadows, his figure melting into the rocks until he was gone. I turned to my stepdad, my voice trembling. "Who was that?" He hesitated, the answer sitting right there on his tongue. But instead of giving it, he took a deep breath and said, "It's not safe to talk here." He motioned for me to follow him back to the car, his urgency clear now. As we drove away from the cove, the road felt narrower, darker. Every turn of the wheel felt like it was pulling us closer to something I wasn't sure I wanted to reach. My stepdad kept glancing in the rearview mirror, and I could tell, whatever was happening tonight wasn't over. In fact, it was only getting started. The drive felt longer than before, the dark road stretching endlessly ahead. My stepdad's hands were tight on the steering wheel now, his knuckles pale in the dim dashboard light. I could tell he was wrestling with something, but I didn't know if it was anger, fear, or both. Finally, after what felt like miles of silence, he pulled over near an old service station that had been closed for years. The parking lot was empty, lit only by a flickering street lamp. He turned off the engine and faced me. "That man you saw, he's not a stranger to me," he said quietly. "He used to be my business partner. We got involved in something years ago that went bad. I thought it was over. But now, it's not." His voice was heavy, like each word was costing him. I asked what it had to do with me, my heart still racing. That's when he hesitated, then reached into the glove compartment. Inside was a worn leather folder. He handed it to me. Inside were old photos, some of him and the stranger, others of places I didn't recognize. And then there was one that made my breath catch. It was of my mother, younger, standing with both men. "She knew him?" I asked. "She knew more than you think," he replied, his eyes dark. "This wasn't just my past, it's hers too. And now he's trying to pull you into it." Before I could ask more, headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter fast. My stepdad's expression sharpened. "We don't have time. You need to trust me right now." The car with the headlights slowed as it approached, and for a split second, I thought it was the stranger again. But when it stopped beside us, the window rolled down to reveal my mom. Her face was pale, her eyes scanning both of us. "Get in," she said, her voice tense. "We have to leave, he's not working alone." It hit me then, this night hadn't been random. The dinner, the drive, the cove, it had all been a way to keep me away from something, or someone, until they could decide what to tell me. And now, as I climbed into my mom's car, I realized that whatever I thought I knew about my family was about to change forever. The car ride with my mom felt like it stretched on for hours, even though I knew we weren't going far. The tension sat thick in the air, heavier than the sound of the tires on the empty road. My stepdad followed close behind in his own car, his headlights a steady reminder that whatever had been hidden from me was finally out in the open. I kept my eyes on my mom, waiting for her to speak, but she gripped the wheel like she was holding the whole situation together with her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "That man you saw at the cove, his name is Daniel. Years ago, before I met your stepdad, I was working with him on a project that turned into something dangerous. We both walked away, but not without making enemies." She glanced at me quickly before looking back at the road. "Your stepdad didn't get involved until later, trying to protect me. That's why he's been so guarded. It wasn't about keeping things from you. It was about keeping you safe." Her words sank in slowly, fitting together with the pieces I'd seen tonight. I thought back to the way my stepdad stood in front of me when Daniel appeared, how his voice had tightened when the phone calls came, how he'd avoided going home. Every move had been deliberate. We pulled into the driveway, and for the first time all night, I felt the weight in my chest ease just a little. My stepdad parked behind us and walked up the path, his expression softer now. He didn't try to explain further, and he didn't have to. Some truths are better shown than told. Inside, the three of us sat at the kitchen table. We didn't go into every detail, and maybe we never would, but I understood enough to know my life hadn't been as simple as I'd believed. I realized that families aren't defined only by the easy days. They're built in the moments when someone chooses to stand between you and whatever's coming. When I finally went to bed, the sun was just starting to rise, painting the walls in soft gold. The night had been long, confusing, and full of shadows, but I knew one thing for certain: even in the darkest moments, the people who truly care will never let you face it alone.